the place where singles shine, celebrating life, divine by design, faith and love, we intertwine. Route 77 with your journey's prime.
Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. Today, we're going to explore a topic that challenges us to actively live out our singleness with purpose, rather than waiting for what's next. We'll discuss how to embrace this season with intention and faith, leaning into God's plans for our lives right now. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am your host, Natasha, and I am here with Monique.
Hello.
And potentially no David. I had a insanely busy weekend again, and so I had to move this to Monday night, which is usually harder for him to come to because he has like school and usually like things having to be due and all that type of stuff. So we'll see if he comes. If he comes on, then he'll join us. But if not, we'll hopefully he'll see him here next time. So yeah. Okay. So we talked, I promised at the end of last episode that we would have a conversation about what to do with, there you go, what to do with your singleness, like now. Because we always talk about not focusing on what we don't have, like we're supposed to be using it. And yet I don't think we often say like any practical applications. What are we doing? What are we supposed to do? And I also was thinking about a couple of topics that we can cover in the future. Just going to mention it now while I'm thinking about it. I wanted to do a two-parter, but they're two separate, but the same. The dangers of being overly marriage focused and the dangers of being overly single focused. Okay. So that's like my plan for the next 2 weeks after this. So if that gives us something spark people's interest, that's my plan for the next couple of weeks. Because I thought that would be a good, and it fits in this in the sense that we're trying to focus on this being the now, like what we're doing with our time now and stuff. So one of our pillars is active. So we're not just being passively single, we're actually living our singleness actively. And we do believe that this is biblically mandated. We're not just making this up. What's interesting is that people will say things like, oh, I feel like finding a spouse is a full-time job. And you're sitting there, that's not really how it should work, because I feel like that's definitely not using the time that God gave you wisely.
Okay.
If you're like spending basically all your efforts, you're just, I don't know, being too active in the search for a spouse. And again, that's what I want to talk about with the dangers of being too overly marriage focused. But it's just an idea because we forget where we are now. We forget that we're actually supposed to live now. And I don't mean that in a way that live now for tomorrow we die. And then you're just going to live your crazy life now because nothing else means anything. I just mean God's calling us to live.
Didn't play that?
Yeah.
Eat, drink, tomorrow we don't.
Yeah, basically that's what it's like. If our faith is not real, then we might as well live like that. If what we are believing is not true, then what's
That's
the
the
point of anything?
context, by the way.
Yeah, that's the context. Basically, we're not true in what we believe, then what's the point of anything?
Yeah.
That's really the idea.
If
We might as well just
Christ-
have fun now.
Yeah. If Christ is not risen from the dead, what are we doing?
Yeah, we might as well just do whatever we want to make us happy in the moment. And I think that's the point. I don't want us to say, oh, I'm never getting married, or I'm never going to do this, or there's nothing beyond now. What's the point? I'm just going to live up my single life. We're going to live up my life to everything I can now. And that's very like center focused. Focus on me, not on what's God's calling me to do. No, God's calling us to have a far future focus, but also a very now focus. So our future focus is that we are that heaven is coming. We don't know when, but it's coming. It's a definite ending point of our life on earth. It's not an ending point of our life, but it's our ending point of our life on earth. And
what does that say? You never know when your life will be called into account.
Yeah.
I had one pastor when he was doing a sermon basically about this kind of thing. And he said, we're all one heartbeat away from heaven.
Exactly.
Because the minute your heart stops, you're done.
I'm just trying to read some of these verses here. So it says in Colossians 3:17, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and God the Father through him. So we have to realize that we're not supposed to live this part of our life for ourselves. We're supposed to be living every word and deed that we do, like that's every single thing that we're doing in the moments that we're doing it are supposed to be for God. Do we do that every day? I'd
Mhm.
say big no, I don't do that. I don't have my mindset always like that. Unfortunately, that's a sinful way to act, and it's just always that's why you can say, "Oh, we've never sinned." I'm like, we're sinning constantly every day, and that's why we need to ask for like we ask forgiveness for our sins, even if we can't specifically think of them in the moment, but we know we've done it. But we need to like actually the things that we're doing.
And if you
Um,
don't, and if you say, that's not true, I don't sin every day. Do you drive a car? People cut you off. People drive like idiots. Did I say that? Yes, this is where I fail dreadfully driving the car.
I just
Getting
want to
behind
find this verse.
people who don't use
Yeah.
their signal lights. They don't know how to merge. They stop when they're not supposed to. It's like there's nobody in front of you. Why are you stopping? There's nothing there. Are you imagining things? Is there a ghost? Did somebody run out and I didn't see that? No, nobody.
Right.
But you put your brakes on. Why? Why are you doing? But yes, this is where I have to. God forgive me. I should not have called him that word
So like, whenever
every day.
right, it
Oh
happens way
Lord,
too
help
often.
me! Lord, help me!
What we I want to think about too is there's the parable of the talents.
Mm,
It's a good one to even talk about this because they were all given a different portion of money, each of the three servants,
mhm,
and they each the first two servants went out to invest it in whatever in like business or other things like they went out and used the money so that they could hopefully get a return on that money. But the third servant just went and buried the money because he was like afraid that if he lost the money, then the god or the owner or the master would come back and basically punish him for losing his little bit of money. And yet when the master comes back and the first two had like a investment, they had a return on the money. So they had the money plus more. And then the other one came and said, "Hey, here's exactly what you left me. I gave you the exact amount that you left me. There's not a single penny missing." And the guy was like, the master's like, "What did you do with it?" He's just, "I basically buried it and made sure I didn't lose it." And the master's then that's evil and wicked because you were basically like, you know that I'm going to demand a return on my investment, on the money that I gave you. And you didn't even try. I would have been happier if you tried and failed than if you just left it in the ground. As
put it in the bank so it got interest.
yeah, he's basically like, why didn't you even just put it in a bank? Because that would have been, he did nothing. And I feel like that's what happens a lot of times in our singleness. We actually do nothing with it,
Mhm,
where it's seen as this not already not yet really live it, and you're not really ready to start your life because you're not married, or it's a thing you want to get rid of. So, like you said, you're trying to spend your whole like a job trying to find a spouse. So you're focused completely on this future possibility and not on now. And everything that you're doing is it's not actually trying to gain a return from of the of the talents, of the money, of the responsibilities that God has given us. We're just like burying it in the ground so that once we get married, we'll be like, look, I'm this and that, and I'm the perfect wife or I'm the perfect husband because I didn't do this and I didn't do that. But you're like, what did you do? You're like, yeah, you shouldn't go out and be having sex. And no, you shouldn't be like doing some things without outside the marriage. But it doesn't mean you don't do anything with that.
mhm.
Like, you're like, "Oh, look, I don't have debt." I was like, "Okay, that's good. You don't have debt." But did you actually go and try something and that's why you like, and it or did you just be like, "I sat on my hands and just basically barely made it through, but I didn't go into debt, so I'm happy for that." In a sense, 'cause people can be like so much, but what did they do? Because they became so focused on the money issue. Like, I know a person who was so focused on not going in debt that they did not do pretty much anything with their life. Because they didn't wanna spend money by going out, they didn't wanna spend like, everything else, they was so focused on that fact that, like, they did nothing in their life. Basically stayed at home, kept one light bulb on, didn't like, that type of thing, and you're like, "Well, yeah, you didn't go into debt or you got yourself out of debt, but at what cost to, like, anything in your life? Like, what did you do to bring about God's kingdom or the commission of go out and make disciples?" If you just basically hibernated in your house, refused to go and do anything with anybody, the only thing you had was like minimal. interaction with coworkers, and that was it. What do you have to show for
The time you
your
spent
time,
doing nothing.
the time you spent? And you're going, here's the money you gave me. Not a single cent is missing.
I can attest to that. Because after I moved into my condo, and then after I helped my ex-husband with his cancer, and then he died. And then I just sat in my apartment. I worked. I went home. I worked. I went home. I went to church. I went home. I worked. I went home for almost 10 years. Actually, for 10 years. Because he died in 2007, and I didn't do Taekwondo until 2017.
2017. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And I'll say, like, my 20s were, I cannot give you a single thing that I did in my 20s that was the advancement of the kingdom of God.
now I could have started Taekwondo earlier. I actually did look into martial arts during that time,
Mm.
but there was nobody that
I
had.
wasn't here yet.
You weren't here yet. So they checked out. They didn't have really anything for adults. They had a lot of stuff for kids. They
Mhm.
might have had a couple of, but they were at times when I was still coming in from Vancouver. I couldn't make those classes.
Yeah.
So I gave up because I thought there wasn't anything I could do. And I tried to join a gym, but these are temporal things, right?
Mhm.
And
And I think I mentioned, like, before in the podcast how one reason I started my master's in apologetics was because I really felt convicted about the fact that, like, I love sports
yeah,
and Taekwondo is super challenging for me. And I was putting a lot of my energy and time into that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I had zero to show for what God wanted me to do, in a sense, for progressing the kingdom of God for my part.
yeah,
And so I felt a deep conviction. If I could put this much effort into a temporal black belt, can't I do the same for a spiritual black belt, in a sense? And
yeah.
it was a
And
real convicting moment.
for me, it was get me out of the house because I wasn't doing anything except sitting on the couch watching TV, and that wasn't good for my health, and it wasn't good for my weight, and it wasn't good for a whole lot of things, really. I had friends who said, it's you're a hermit. We never see you, which is true because I just spent all my time inside doing nothing. There's no way to live. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that there was a good 10-year gap where I literally wasted my life because I was, oh, woe is me. And now I'm no longer married. I'm
Yeah.
not married.
And while I
There's
was
nobody
married,
there.
I can't say that I did much either because of the
Yeah.
abusive situation I was in, other than survival, in a
Yeah.
sense. There wasn't like, again, I made decisions, and God didn't want things for me, but I chose them, and he respected the fact that I chose them, but I had to live with the consequences. And part of that is that I had to spend, like, basically 10 years in survival mode,
Yeah.
instead of actually being able, like, actually progressing in what God. So I had, like, 20s when I basically did nothing, and my 30s when I basically did nothing for the advancement of the kingdom, because I was in a situation that I chose for myself, and you couldn't focus. And I'm not saying that survival is not a good thing, but because of decisions I made, because I was so focused on needing to get married, that I made decisions that were not great, and I had to live the consequences of that. So again, it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was like God kicking me in the butt and being like, okay, you got to grow up now. You're not a child anymore.
Yeah.
You're not your parents' faith. You're your own faith, and you got to start living it.
Yeah.
And
I did do some church activities. I realized things come to mind. When our church was being built, I was in a prayer group that met every Tuesday night. So we did a lot of, so I did do praying on Tuesday nights.
yeah,
Because,
that's good.
is that good? Was I a good
Yeah,
girl? I prayed Tuesday
good
nights.
girl. Good girl.
At me on the head. And I was the church librarian. That consumed a lot of and I really enjoyed it. But when COVID came around and the whole churches got shut down, all of that literally ended. I think the prayer group actually disbanded long before that too, because the church was actually now a building and it wasn't,
Because when I knew you at Taekwondo, that was before COVID, and I think you were not doing it, but then you were starting it, and then nobody was coming.
yeah, trying to get it going again in the church because nobody that from the original group wanted to get together anymore. So then it would just turn into gathering around a little table and doing coloring because I was
Waiting for
sitting.
happiness by yourself.
The funny thing is that some of the parents would come with their kids, but some of the kids weren't in because it was on a Tuesday night and that's when they had gyms and cadets. And they would have other kids with them who weren't in those. So in order to keep them occupied, I became like the babysitter.
Is that why you were there?
That wasn't why I was there. No, so that didn't last very long either. And then, of course, COVID shut everything down. But I was already in Taekwondo then, and a lot of things were changing really rapidly for me around that time. So,
Pardon me.
tired.
I'm sorry, I keep yawning. It's nothing to do with what Monique's saying. It's just been a very long couple weeks. And I'm trying.
But
I'm trying hard.
I wasn't for anybody either. I was in that kind of stage where I think earlier after he passed away, so now who would I find to get married to? Because I was still younger then. But as time started to tick away and I started to get really comfortable with my own company, then I stopped looking and then I didn't care anymore.
Then what can happen? We end up in an apathy of, I don't need no one, and I'm going to sit here and sit on the couch and eat like ice cream or whatever, or play my video games. And then it's like the opposite of, again, this is what I want to talk about, the dangers of almost like overly singleness, because you end up still focusing on self. Like, both is focusing on self in different ways. Yeah. Maybe we should have done this one after, but it's still good. It's like I wanted to, but it's good to touch
you may hear these stories again.
It's good to touch on these issues, and then on the day we'll get different conversations, more in-depth conversations. But and I guess on those ones we can always refer back to this one about getting back into our active. And so in the last, I'll be turning 45 in a few days, and I will say I separated and started doing my master's. I want to say when I was 40, so that would have been in 2019. We moved in 2020, so I started applying for my master's, because it was just when we were moving that I had my very first class. So I had made all these changes. Counseling helped us super about it. And he was the one that encouraged me about that when I talked about maybe doing my master's. But I actually separated, and I started having to God was working in me to alter my view of being single, not being married, maybe never being married, not being a mom, maybe never being a mom, having these realities come to me, whether or not I don't know the future, but it's that hard of what if, because if I had asked those questions before, in my 20s, what if you never get married? I would have been like, that would be the worst thing in my whole entire life if I never got married. What if you're never a mom? That'd be the worst thing in the whole world. So I was obviously having too much on, and that was up until I was 40, having those things. That's why I was in my marriage. I'm at least I'm married. At least I'm this. But then we couldn't have kids. And then it was I'm never going to be a mom. Look at all these people being moms. I can't even be a mom. And we were going to try different things, but fortunately, God had different plans and we didn't go down that road. And now I'm okay. If I'm never a mom, I'm never a mom. If I am a mom, I get to be a mom. If I'm never married again, I'm not married. If I do, okay. I've been able to open myself up more to that. But since I was turned 40, that's when my life changed. I feel in the last almost 5 years, I've been doing way more of what God's calling me to do in the moment than I did all the 40 years before that, leading up to that, in almost 5 years.
That's I guess you could say that's even though it's never too late to do anything for God, no matter how old you are, there is still that regret I have that it took me so long to realize where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my life and where God was leading me. Because my whole purpose in life was that I should be a wife and a mom. I did not want to be alone for the rest of my life, afraid that I was going to die alone in my apartment and nobody find me. That was a fear I had. It was terrible. And now it's just what a silly thing to fear, because it's one of my coworkers, her brother-in-law. No, her brother, he had gone off to work. Him and his wife, they slept in separate bedrooms, not because they weren't getting along, but because that they were able to sleep better that way. And gone to work, and usually he hears from his wife during the day. And he never heard from her. And so she didn't answer. He was a little concerned, but he didn't think too much of it. But when he went home, he found out that she had died in her sleep. He was totally
But there's no guarantees anyway.
So
you and I both have got cousins who passed away in their sleep and their parents found them.
Yeah.
It's just, there's no guarantee.
No.
And then, but we have so much focus on this non-existent future. It consumes us.
Yeah.
It consumes us with temptation. It consumes us with our fears. It consumes us with our desires.
Yep.
And what better thing does Satan have to do than keep our focus from what we're supposed to be doing? And so for him to be like, and I'm not saying the devil made me do it all of the time. Like I'm pretty good at doing things wrong myself. But I'm saying like what better lie
Yeah.
does Satan have than just like a 1 degree off truth?
Right.
Because a 1 degree off truth is still a lie. But by him saying, yeah, what's wrong with wanting to be a wife and a mother? That is a good thing. You should be thinking about that all the time. And that's not a wrong thing to want. Like I said, it's just 1 degree off, but it's still wrong because it takes my focus off of God.
Yep.
And 1 degree doesn't mean a lot at the beginning, but as time goes by, that 1 degree becomes
Right.
like
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
That's that.
And not to beat the dead horse, but you know what Pastor Justin says about that? When you take a good thing, turn it into a God thing, then it becomes a very bad thing. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we turn that marriage and being with somebody and not being alone for the rest of our lives, we turn that into such an idol that it becomes,
Well, it's interesting because we think we'll have that security and
yeah,
safety in a human person, but not that God would provide a better safety and
right.
security through his will. It's we're going like, sorry, God, you're not enough. I don't want to be alone.
And we
Well,
always,
it seems weird, but it's like when you're actually saying that. I'm afraid to die alone, but then you're like, but God's always with us. But I'm still, but it's just
I know.
different. We know that it's just,
Well, we're going through that actually right now. We had a couple of days ago where our housemates had to tell us that they have to leave because one of them has to go back to Ontario. And the other one, well, she just can't afford to take on the whole rent herself. So she's going to move into a smaller room with I believe, with a bunch of other people,
coworker, I think.
coworker. Yeah. So we were just like, oh, okay. So now we've got to find somebody else. And we're just like, who? Last minute.
And what I find
Oh,
was funny, but we didn't pray about it every night.
no. We
But
didn't.
then when we started to pray about it a couple of nights in a row, all of a sudden
Yeah.
we have a new person that's going
Yep.
to be here for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
it's a,
funny because
and I think it's going to be a really cool thing because she's a nurse who has to travel around to different hospitals. And her parents actually live not that far away, but they live in a different municipality, which is too far away from the hospital that she's going to be working at. And we're like just up the
right in
road.
the right spot. Just
Yeah.
and we sit there, we're like, oh, we don't like change. Nobody really does. Nobody's like, yay, change. We love the girls that are here and we enjoy having them as
I was
our
expecting them to
husband.
stay for 2 years.
And we love that, and it's just we don't like anybody to leave, but then we have to also be open to the fact that God's moving things and that we were like, "Oh, we do." I was sitting there going, "There's not really any responses," and all the people that asking are like, "Hey, we're couples, can we come?" And we're like, we don't really want that. And
That's
also, it's,
uncomfortable.
"Oh, if I don't take the bedroom, can we have it for cheaper?" And it's just, yeah, no. We have a specific budget. This is what we have. And so it was just like a little bit stressful because we're getting closer to when the girls are leaving. And so it was just like,
What are we going to
are we going to
do?
get somebody? Because there was a couple of months between the previous one and them. So we were like, we know it's a little bit of a stressor on us, but we're also
Yeah.
not just going to go we're not going to,
No.
we really were praying that we didn't want to just take, oh, whatever, we'll just take the first one. And we always know
Yeah.
that
And then
isn't the greatest thing.
and when you're in like the November, December months, it's always such a hard time to have to try to deal with everything. We've got
Yeah.
presents,
And
Christmas.
it's also not like a good time for students because that's more January. And it's like it's not really a moving time for people a
Yeah.
lot, except in, I think, what, November is a thing. But
Is
anyway.
that what they call? Well, I thought that was that? I thought that was about mustaches.
Well, yeah, I think there was a moving thing about November. Anyway, but it's just like it was seemed like where like people saying, "Oh, I definitely want to come and stay there," and then you like never hear from them again,
Hmm.
and you're like, okay, because they're like maybe that's what God's calling of you. And so we finally, when we sat down, we were like, no, we had to pray about this more like
Specific.
every day,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden things moved, and then now we have this other thing. It's just a couple of months, but you never know what'll come next. So we have to
Right.
be. We're just. It's hard to let go of the stress, but at the same time, it's just yeah. And then when God, it's like I was just waiting for you to
Love it.
ask properly. Yeah, pray about it.
Yep.
Here you go.
Yep. And her parents came by the other day and they just absolutely loved the place and they were happy with what they heard because the two girls were still here. And even they said, we loved it here. This is such a safe place. And we were so happy. We hate that we have to leave. So,
So it's just so we had to so just be able to just refocusing on
yeah.
instead of some fearful future, focusing on where God, hey, God's calling us to pray right now
Yeah.
because we can't do anything about getting people to rent except put it on Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji. Like we can
Yeah.
put those things out there, but we can't like force it any more than you can force a marriage
Mhm.
partner.
Yeah.
Because you sit there like people going like I said that I had so many people like were saying it's like a full-time job on some of these single sites. And you're like, if you're putting that much work into it, it's more of a passive thing. Like you do your part, which is like getting yourself out there or whatever and making sure you're presentable in a sense. Like you haven't not had a shower for 2 weeks and all your clothes are hanging out. I don't know. I don't want to say like people have to gussy themselves up every time they go out, but I just mean be presentable like a normal human being, like that people would want to be with. And then, but other than that, what else can you do?
Yeah.
Like you can't
You can't.
forcefully take somebody.
No.
But what happens too is you start to take your standards and be like, maybe this one's not so important. I can live without that. But you start throwing things out that are actually important.
Yeah.
You can say,
And I
okay,
could say,
I'm okay with the person being shorter than me when you were like, oh, I have to have a person taller. That may not be a big deal, but if you start going, maybe it's okay if they're not quite a Christian. There's things that you might throw out that
yeah.
is super important because you start to focus on what you have. I have to have this and I have to
Yeah.
do whatever it takes to get it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I thought that I'm going into dating online because I was living in the middle of nowhere. I'm not like, we didn't have anywhere to go very much. So I was just like, this time, this it. And I get a renewed vigor for it. I'm like, that's it. I'm not going to be as picky. I'm just going to be like less picky and I'm going to make like, this is going to happen this time. I'm just being too picky. That's my problem. And they would just be like the same thing over and over again. And I was just like, but I felt like I like made this New Year's resolution to make sure I found a guy. There's not anything you can do about it.
No, for one, you cannot make someone like you.
No.
Nope.
And
They're
do you
either
really
going to
want
like
to
you
be
or
with
they're
a
not.
person that you forced into it?
Yeah. Who
I don't
was
know.
like, oh, I guess you'll do.
Yeah. Or some women will actually let themselves get pregnant so they can force the other person to marry them.
Bad
Um,
idea.
yeah.
Bad idea.
And there might even be some guys who basically try to get them pregnant so that they'll stay with them.
Very bad idea.
And yeah, you're forcing people to be with you? Is that really the best way to one, start a marriage and two, be a parent to a couple, like a role models to your children?
Great way to start off. Shotgun wedding. Hello. Not.
Right.
Yeah.
And then children eventually can do the math and then it becomes a thing. And
Although nowadays, do people care about that?
it's not as much, but if you're as a Christian person, hopefully like you care a
It
little
would be
bit.
a little bit. Yeah.
But it's just because we focus so much on trying to force God's hand in a sense. If you actually think about it, you're not waiting on any of God's timing. And so
No.
that's why we say you can want these things and you can do your part. If you want to find a spouse, okay. Are you getting yourself to a place where you can see people or meet people? I think that's a better place to meet them than online. But anyway, but again, I wouldn't say specifically going out to like singles dating events and stuff. You might want to do that, but I don't think that's the best way even to meet, like to really get to know people.
Then they're done.
But
There's nobody there.
yeah, but you've made yourself available in the sense that you're not hermetizing yourself.
Right.
Okay. But and also you're, like I said, you're making yourself presentable. Like for me, presentable is like t-shirts, jeans, and my short hair and no makeup. So I'm not saying like people have to go out there like crazy. But if you are that type of person, you
you're a
enjoy that.
fashion model waiting for the runway.
Yeah. And there's some people who enjoy that and they
Yeah.
like the makeup and that's fine. Okay. As long as you're doing it modestly, go for it. But all I mean is that you're going out there, you're not like look like you just been sitting in bed in your bathrobe for 3 weeks. I think that's not really like a plus for people.
No.
Even if you have been, at least don't look like it.
Yeah. At least shower first. Put on some
Right?
deodorant. Brush your teeth.
So you've done what you can.
Brush the
Okay.
teeth. Oh,
Brush the teeth.
that is a very huge thing for me. Just so that you know that when I was with my ex before my husband and we'd broken up and he found himself a new girl and he was all this and he thought he was all that. And then he came and stood beside me and he smiled at me and I forgot that the guy never brushed his teeth. And I lived with that. I put up with that. I almost threw up on his shoes. And I'm going,
Yeah.
you know what? I think I just saved myself.
She can have you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you got that.
So you've done your part.
Yeah.
The best that you can in a sense of making yourself presentable.
Desperation.
You've worked on yourself as a person, maybe. I always say work on yourself. But then it's still so that you can have something for a future spouse. But anyway, instead of working on yourself for yourself's sake. But then if you're actually looking at, okay, what is God calling me to do in this moment in my singleness? Am I supposed to? And I want to say, okay, it's not always like maybe you're working two jobs like we are, and there's not as much time to do other things. But I'm going to say, like, maybe he's calling you to do something that's outside of your work and your pleasure, like hobby or whatever,
Mhm.
video games, sports, music, whatever it is. Because for me, like we're working two jobs and yet we're still making time to do these podcasts
Some
because we
days it's
feel
a
this is what God's calling.
some days it's a stress.
We're like, we're recording on a Monday night and this is coming out in 2 hours or a little bit longer, depending on how long it takes me to edit this. So like we're still making it. We have not missed a week.
Yeah.
In over a year and a half, we have not missed a week. We have made it a priority to at least get it done. We're
Yep.
trying to make it a priority to get it done earlier, but sometimes things happen. But I'll stay up past midnight to do this because it is important. So it's possible. And I think God is calling us in some way to advance the kingdom in something.
Yeah.
And you have to see, it's going to look at different times. Like at one point, it was just me starting my master's. That has no effect on other people.
No.
But look where it's brought us
Mhm.
in the last 4 years. Like it
Yep.
came from, I don't know where God's calling me in this. All I know is that I need to take this course.
Yep.
One course at a time. One course at a time.
And
And I
we
can't even take them some semesters because I can't afford them.
Yeah.
But I'm just checking them off one at a time. And then it led to the ideas of talking about this because I was researching more into singleness. And then we're like, you know what? This needs to happen. And this needs to happen. And then it was all of a sudden, it was like God saying, yeah, it does need to happen. And we're like, I'm like tagging you two and David as three of my people that are going to work on this ministry. And he could be tagging people all over the world working on similar stuff, but this is what he did for us specifically in our lives. And so that's what we started focusing in on. This is what God's calling. And then it led, I think, to more of you taking more stuff in church.
Mhm.
Like you started taking on more things in church. It's just so it just becomes, I don't know, it's like a snowball.
Yep. Yeah.
Like you start little, you start looking at yourself and being like, hey, what's God calling me to work on at this moment?
Yep.
And then it's just, okay, I'm going to do that. And I don't know where it's going to lead. And that's okay. Maybe I hope it leads this way. Maybe I hope it leads this way. But you got to take those hopes and be like, poof. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If it does. But right now, God, at this very single moment of time, what is God calling you to do? I don't mean what's your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. That's great to have those ideas and to think ahead. But what is God calling you right at this second? And it might be sleep because
It
it
might
is
be.
like 9:45.
It
But
might be sleep. It might be prayer. It might
yep.
be something else entirely different.
And even like for me starting the masters, okay, it got me more into the singleness and the other two subjects I'm interested in. But it actually it was at least for at the same time as us starting this podcast and ministry. It led to Monique and I starting devotions together. Both of us struggled having our own personal devotions any regularly in all of our lives. And now we have read the Bible in a year. We're reading the Bible in a year again. And we've had prayer and it's morphed over time and how it looks and what God's calling us to do within that prayer time, within that devotions time. But that was a direct result of like
Mhm.
us looking where God was
Yeah.
calling for us in this minute.
Yeah.
All these changes did not happen. We didn't have these plans. And like when I started my master's, I wasn't like, I want to start a singles ministry and a podcast. And none
I'm
of
going to
this
be
was
rich
in
and
my even
famous. Are we rich and famous yet?
we're waiting for that point.
The funny thing is that because both you and I have totally agreed that this podcast is entirely God's, not ours. We have no control over it. We can't make people listen. We can't go out there. We're not going to go out and solicit people to come and listen if you listen, if you don't. If you subscribe, if you don't. We believe, though, that the topics that we're talking about and getting them out there, that one day somebody is going to need to hear it and they're going to
Yeah.
find
And
it.
even if it's one person and it helps them like avoid the things we did or step one step closer to God, like it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
And right now we have 3 plays per episode or something, or sometimes it'll pop up or whatever. But that's okay.
Yeah.
Like we're not worried about getting massive followers and things like that. But we do want to be a resource. And also by talking about these topics and discussing them with one another and having David giving that a little different perspective and things like that, like it actually creates more of a knowledge within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And understanding how like when we make the outlines and we talk about the stuff and we try to follow through, like it helps us. And then we have conversations with other people and be like, hey, you know what? This, and then we can actually, it's even teaching us as we do it.
Yeah.
So like just that by us doing these podcasts, we're learning
Mhm.
as we speak because we may have had these kind of thoughts in our head, but we've never like vocalized them or created any sort of like logical outline of them. If we randomly start a conversation, we might develop this over time while we're having the conversation with the person, but now we actually have a basis in our heads. And then we have another topic and another conversation. Like we slowly build up these ideas and these conversation points that we can have with people. And we have had with people
Mhm.
of what it means to be single. Like
Yep.
these and to actually enjoy it and not just be like, I don't know, it's just not be facetious about it and not pretend that we have the gift of singleness. We're doing good and we feel all, I'm doing awesome with this again, this thing.
Yep. I'm so better. Forget
So,
idiot.
and it's the abuse I get all the time.
And the funny thing is that a lot of times we spend a whole heck of a lot of time laughing at each other because it's just we reading the Bible and something will jump out at us and we just and we're laughing or we're just like, I can't believe I read that. Do I have to?
I'm not reading tonight. Good thing.
Oh yes, because it's Tuesday and I get to do the prayer.
Yes.
That's tomorrow. Or is that tonight?
Trudeau.
Wait a minute.
That's
Am I
tomorrow.
reading? Am I reading tonight or are you reading tonight? Didn't you read last night? Did you?
I read last night.
And I
yes.
prayed last night, which means I'm reading tonight.
You get to pray tomorrow.
Oh man.
We just love God's command to pray for our leaders, Justin Trudeau.
Yes. God bless that man.
And
Because
bring him
there's
to
nothing
belief,
else we could do.
Yeah.
See, so this is the kind of enjoyment that you can have with other people who are not in that messy
Woe
relationship.
is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet you if you stepped back from this, I have to be married right now mentality and start asking, what if I don't get married in the next year?
Even if you don't want to think about the fact that you might never get married.
Yeah.
Just
Give yourself a smaller window and say, okay, so say in the next 5 years, I actually don't get married. What do I do with my life? What does God want me to do? And I bet you,
and I'll say what I did. It's just like I just want to say I literally didn't do anything because I didn't want to like
acknowledge.
it was more like what if my husband's not called to this? Like I'll start something that won't like there's no point in starting anything because I'm just gonna get married and leave it anyway.
How come you
That's
have
the
hero?
idea. I don't know. Hero's here, Zeus is here. I don't know.
Cheetah's up there. All I see is her tail.
Poofy. Yeah, but like I'm just saying, like I literally did not start anything because I was in constant fear that basically that not fear, but like that the idea of one, it was keeping me from being a husband because I was doing something that would needed to be complete. And two, but it was just like, what's the point of starting anything? Because I'm just gonna get married and be away from mom anyway. So it
You
like
know,
it really
you know what I heard? I can't go to this church function at this other church because what if I meet somebody from that church and they want me to leave my church?
these random what ifs, but it's just yeah.
Needless to say, that never happened. And what actually happened is that we moved into the house. You were going to a different church, but then you're like, oh, I'll go to your church because my church actually follows more in your beliefs. And what's so funny
Yeah.
how that happened? And now you go to my
It's just-
church and
It's my church now too. And
yeah.
and yeah, I'm actually more not that Northview is awesome.
Yeah.
It was like
The
perfect for what I
apologetics.
needed at the time. It was brilliant. It just was not quite. I couldn't become a member.
Yep.
There was different belief system, a little bit doctrinally that I didn't agree with, and I would never have been able to become a member because of it. And so it was like so close to being the right one, but then Gateway became actually the right one. And at the time before, it wouldn't have made sense for me to drive all the way across Abbotsford. And I was always working on Sundays anyway. Like Northview had the nighttime service, which is really why I started going there. But it was awesome, and it was like really supportive of everything I went through and all this type of stuff. So I know
we can always do that. Hey,
which
go to a nighttime service.
oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes I listen to them on the Sunday when I'm listening to different sermons and stuff. But
and then, that's where the Apologetics Canada came out of.
yeah, exactly. And on that note, for a second, Apologetics Canada this year, their conference is not the same night as the gala. I'm super excited.
Oh
If I
yay!
know gala.
Oh yay!
Because the gala is like the first, and it's the next weekend.
It's about time. Because I was always going there all by myself and just like, yeah, you're buying these tickets
I wanted
for
the
us
gala.
to go, and I go.
literally go there in time for lunch last year, and I bought stuff and left. It's like I paid money to go pay money. That's all I could do. Everything was on the 2nd of March last year. Or yeah, it was like insane.
It was insane.
Everything.
Yeah.
I had a talk to do. I had a 4-H thing. Then there was the apologist conference. There was the Taekwondo gala, and my brother came.
All
It
on the
was
same weekend.
on the same team. And I think there was something else there was something else happening. And then Master Jose was like, guess what the day that is that's happening? And I'm like, March 2nd. Yeah. It was something, I think it was like the home opener for the Whitecaps or something. It was just really funny because it was like, it just happened that everything was on March 2nd.
Not this
So
time.
it is not that this time. I'm pretty excited to go to the Apologetics Canada.
Yeah.
So when we take a look at these things, we're asking what you think God is wanting you to do now. Right now, look at your life and this, ask what Monique said. If, say, for 1 year, you're not going to be married, that's not even out of the realm of possibility. Even if you meet somebody tomorrow, the chances of you being married to that person in less than a year is hopefully not on the table because that's usually, anyway,
Not a
married
good
too
sign.
quick.
Yeah, don't get married
Yeah,
too
not a
quick.
good sign. Anyway, so just give yourself 1 year and be like, okay, God, what are you calling me to do in this moment that's going to maybe take a year to fulfill?
And you may
And
already have had an impression of it, but you've pushed it aside because you're sitting there, no, that's not possible. Because if I go and do this, then where's that going to lead? And what if, and then all those what ifs start coming.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So right on the nose there, because that's definitely so. Just allow yourself the idea that for 1 year you are going to be single and you'll be all God's to use. And how are you going to use that? And like I said, like when I started my master's, I was not expecting where we are today, but I was like, God's calling me to do my master's, and so did one class, and then I did another class, and then you slowly just added them in. And then what I love about masters is that unlike the bachelor's, which you have to do pretty much like papers on specific things, the master's, it's okay, we're having a paper on biblical hermeneutics or whatever, but you get to pick kind of your topic. But you actually can specialize each of your papers to your passion, which is awesome. So I'm just like people who are tired of after their bachelor's and you're like, oh, I can't think of going to a master's. Just keep that in mind that if you're doing a master's in something you're interested in, which hopefully you are, you actually get to make your papers about your passion instead of being like so like more
Structured.
tightly because you take it into other courses and it's no, it needs to be about X or about X. Generally, that in masters it's much more interesting, and I'm able to get really deep into the passions that I have from different angles, which is awesome. Because you think you might just be doing like the same paper and over, but if you're actually coming from it from like Old Testament, but or it's church history subject or Old and New Testament subject or from a Christian ethics subject. Like it's just from all these different angles, it just you end up becoming, it's like a diamond is multifaceted. Like you don't realize how much your passion is faceted until you start looking at it from all these different angles.
And you're
So
looking forward to going back.
I can't wait.
I can tell.
Well, I was like, I hope I can in January. I'm just all hoping I can make enough money because I only did one this year. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do
You
it.
know, all of this is reminding me of the one verse that you quoted down is Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. So there is a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, on and on. So there's, you don't know.
It's interesting they don't actually
time.
say it's time to be single and a time to be married because we don't know. I'm just interesting. It's just an interesting dichotomy to say that's not one of the things they offer you.
No, they don't. It's one of those things that we don't realize is that life is based on seasons. What everything through is based on seasons because especially as a woman, there's going to be a season where you can have kids and then that season is gone. There is a season where you are going to look young and beautiful and then that's gone. Trust me.
Things tires start farming.
Things start going down to the ground that were never down there before. No, but there is a time to mourn for the things that you've lost or that you've never gotten. And then there is a time to be joyful. The joy comes in the morning. You may be sorrowful today, but God promises that joy will come in the morning. Trust in Him. Believe that He has got the best for you. And that's a hard one to believe because
where you can theoretically believe it, but it's hard to practically live out.
Yeah, the heart is deceptive. It will say, "Are you sure?" Are you sure you can trust him with this? Because I don't know if you can. Because what if? Those are horrible words.
Yeah.
Trust me.
That is definitely Satan's words.
And you know what else is Satan's words? If only. Those are horrible words. Those are killer words. So
Yeah.
throw them away.
They're contentedness destroying words.
Yeah, yes, they are. Because one of the things that you have to realize with the word regret is that regret is a past tense word because it means that something that happened 5 minutes ago, you wish you could change. But once that time is gone, you cannot redeem it. It's gone. But you know what? God can redeem everything because he has completely, when I thought my life was destroyed and gone and done, and I was living in the if only I had, if only, or, and when he finally started to get me out of that and started to change my life, may have taken a different path than what it should have taken. And maybe this isn't what I normally would have thought for my life, but it's a lot better than I thought I was going to get back then. It's a
And,
whole lot better than I expected it to ever be.
and nothing that we do surprises God.
No,
He's not, oops, I didn't plan for that. I guess we're not going to, I guess it's all ruined now.
you know,
He, even though he wants us to be a certain way and act a certain way, and he'll bless a certain way, he's not surprised when we choose
no,
a different way.
no, he's not. And he's not surprised when what we think our plans are, and he may have different plans. He planned what happened in my life. I don't think so. I think sin happened, but God took what happened and he says, okay, so we're going to do this plan.
Mhm.
And he says, okay, I know this is going to happen. So this is the plan that I've got worked out for your life. And I couldn't have hoped for anything better in
Mhm.
retrospect. I do, had my life gone in the direction I wanted it to go, I wonder about the things I would have missed out on. And that's a different way to think. Would I have taken Taekwondo? Maybe not. Would I have met you? Would I have met the people that take care of Amber now? All of that kind of stuff.
And we don't have to celebrate an evil
No,
to rejoice in the good.
right. Because God says that what is that? He says, for all things work together for the good, for those.
Of who love me and keep my commandments.
Yeah. So it's not that he's going to um, turn this bad, horrible into it's better. He takes that bad thing and he says, I am going to do a good thing into it and turn what was potentially a bad situation. And I'm going to bring good out of it. And you will be
Like Joseph says that to his brothers when they were afraid. Like they said,
yes,
you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, in a sense that God was able to take what the sinfulness of man did, what desire and did to him, and use it to not just save the lives of those who are in Egypt, but to save like his own family's lives, to save like thousands and thousands of people's lives.
yeah.
Does it mean that God was like, yeah, sure, go ahead and sell your brother into slavery? But he was able to like take that and be like, hey, they meant it for evil, but I can make
Mm.
everything for good.
And it flies in the face of people saying that that we're just puppets in God's hands because we're not. Because God lives outside of time. So he sees the beginning from the end of everything. And we only see right now in front of our nose. So he could see already what Joseph's brothers were going to do. And he says, okay, so since they're going to do this is what I'm going to have happen out of that. And that would
And having a discussion about God stopping things that are evil, that's a whole other discussion. If you want to have it with us, we might talk about it later, but probably not on a podcast because it's
yeah,
not specifically, it's a Bible study topic and it's a very controversial topic.
yeah.
But we're not saying that
No.
God is complicit in sin or that he just lets people go willy nilly because he can't do anything or
No.
whatever. There's lots of other things.
There's a whole lot of
But he's just,
yeah. It's a very
there's a lot of
specific,
more, it's more complex than that.
more
But
complex. I'm simplifying.
we see God is taking, yeah,
Yeah.
we just see God is taking, but people, their sinful actions and
Yep.
desires and saying, yeah, you meant it for evil, but look what I did with it. And then, because like how many people are just like, oh man, why did I let that happen? In a sense, because God did such good from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I knew that like what happened to me was not God's doing. I don't believe that God does evil like that. But man is sinful And people say he could have stopped it. Yeah,
There's
where
a
does
whole
he
free
stop?
will in that whole other conversation. Yeah, that's a
Where do you
whole, yeah.
stop? Because if God was supposed to wipe out all the evil in the world, would he stop at me?
Then we really would be puppets because then he would do what he wants with everybody.
Exactly. So
And
that's a whole, like you
so
said,
he's,
that's a whole other podcast, and we
and it's not an
digress.
easily, and there's many resources that talk about this.
Yes, and that
And we
might
can
be
point
some,
you in that direction if you want.
or we can discuss it, but we'll have to have a really long
It
study
would be like a weird singles podcast.
because it's got nothing to do with being single. You never know where God can take your life because he does work things together for the good, even if you don't see it today, even if you don't see it tomorrow. You may, you only need to worry about today because tomorrow has enough worries of its own. And you never know what God has planned
I
for you.
think there was this one, I trying to remember now, it's been so long since I read this story about this missionary who he and his wife, I think it was, spent so much time in this tribe somewhere, and they had a daughter there. And the wife, I don't know if she got killed, but I think she died in whatever reason, it might have been illness in them while they were being missionaries to this tribe, and the tribe was not having any of it basically. And so when the wife died, the father took the daughter and they moved back to Britain or whatever. And he just became completely depressed. He denied God. He just everything. And he was just like, what was the point of that? It was just like, my wife died. And then he ended up going off and doing stuff, whatever. His daughter was raised by his family and stuff like that. And later on, I think it was his daughter had gone back to that area. And there was like so many Christian people there because of the influence that they had, that they didn't even know they had. He thought that they weren't reaching any, like they were having none of it. They weren't reaching any of it. And then, but the seeds were all there and God grew those seeds even without them there.
Yeah.
And you don't
Because we
know.
think we're the important people.
Yeah.
But God is the one who grows the seed. We just plant it. That's pretty cool.
Again,
You know,
that's the idea. You're doing what you can do,
Yeah.
and then you have to leave the rest.
that reminds me a little bit of that Eliot.
Yeah, it's James Elliott.
Yeah. If you haven't heard about that one, that's another very famous one because what was him and his friends?
Yeah, there was like they were doing that, and they all got killed, and even the people that killed them killed this woman, Elizabeth Elliott's husband, and is now or was at that they all passed away now, but had become like a father figure to their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like actually one of the people who killed him became like a father to her. Like you
because
don't know.
Elizabeth went back to that tribe, didn't she?
Yeah. And they became very enmeshed with that tribe. And it's just very crazy how you would like, if somebody would say, they'd be like, oh, good thing like you left there because they killed your husband. All these people, like, good riddance, write them off. They're not worth it, whatever. And then yet, because of so you don't know what God's gonna. We could never have known that.
No,
like it could have happened, but we had that story because God allows these things to be known, and that we can celebrate in that. Do we celebrate the fact that they were murdered? Well, but can you rejoice in what came about that God, they meant it for evil to get rid of these people.
Yeah.
And yet God used that.
Yep.
Yeah. We could keep going on this.
We could.
We are at an hour.
And we digressed again. Because
Yes, we digress.
apparently this was
We are
something that
passionate.
we have to say about you. We have to tell you that even if you believe that your life is no good, it's not true. It's not true. Your life is worth so much. And you don't have to be married to prove your worth because God says, I call you worthy. And if God calls you worthy, then you are worthy. And God has great plans for you. You just have to surrender yourself up to him and say, Lord, where do you want me to go today? What do you want me to do? Direct my path. Pray before you walk out of the door. And you never know where
you never know where these things like Jim Elliott, like he might know because he's in heaven, but as on this earth, he never saw any change in those tribes, ever. And yet the ramifications of it was huge. So you may never know. Yeah. But that's not even for you to know in a sense. Like we will never know any like all of the ripple effects of our lives. No. There's some things we will know, and there's probably many more things that we'll never know. No. They might be negative, they might be positive, they could be seeds planted, they could be thorns planted. We don't know because there could be people like going, oh, this one time this thing happened and they were Christian and that was it. Yeah. Like you don't know. So you have to like live. We're living for advancing the kingdom of God. And that's why I said every word or deed. Yeah. So those better be seeds that you're planting. Yep. Even if you never see a single sprout.
Not
That's
for you.
not your job.
Nope.
You can't. That's like the thing when I say about trying to get married. Like you do your best. You make yourself out there. You're doing things. You present yourself presentable yourself, and that's pretty much it. Like you can. That's as far as you can actively get in that until you
Yeah.
actually meet someone and then you start talking and doing things. Like you. So the same thing with this. Like you don't know what could lead to finding your spouse.
Nope. I
But
know.
if you're doing something to meet your spouse, then that's the wrong reason.
Yeah.
And
Like you went to university hoping to meet your spouse. You never
oh
did.
yeah, that was like the 100% the only reason I went to a Christian university
There's a
or
girl.
any university.
There's a girl in my church. Same name as me. Funny thing. She, single girl, she decided that what she wanted to do with her life was she wanted to work for GAY, which is a company that goes around. They're a ministry organization that goes around the world, and they do various things in different villages. And she loved it. And she was sending out emails. She said, this is what happened and this and that. And she did that for a couple of years. All of a sudden, we got a very interesting email saying, I think she found her husband. I don't know where she found him because she goes all over the place, but she found him somewhere. So
Yeah. She was putting her focus on something different.
her focus
was
yeah,
not.
her focus was
And
on
I think
something
that's
else.
almost like a better way to meet people because you're not meeting them like going, oh, am I going to marry you? Are you a marriageable person? Like from the moment you meet them, you might meet them like, hey, John, hey,
Yeah.
Sandy. And then you're just working beside each other, or you meet up, or you happen to run into each other at church or whatever. And you slowly get to know them and you're like, hey, wait, this could be a thing. And then, but you've got to know each other even slightly on a less stressful, I got to be my best person. So I think there's like a different chemistry.
Yeah. Like for all I know, like she could have been as a supply thing. I was like, oh, here's a supplies. Oh, hey, I never thought I'd see you here again. And then you just kind of keep meeting up. And then afterwards, just, do you want to go out? Let's go out, have coffee and sit and chat. And like, how are you doing? How things going? And you never know how you've got to let things develop naturally and not because if you keep.
And I think that would be a healthier relationship building.
Oh, absolutely.
And less chance for them to have the red flags that you like it'd be easier to see the red flags because you see them before and you're like, wait, this is not a person I really want to have coffee with.
Yeah.
I've seen how they treat like waitresses or something.
The funny thing is that if you're out in the mission field and you're both in the same mission field and you're both working to better the people's lives around you, then that's somebody that's a little bit more worth being with than just randomly trying to pull somebody out of the internet.
Or wherever you go, single stuff. And it's like you're
at a meat market.
You're stalking. Yeah, you're like on a safari. You're like stalking your prey. That's what I always think of it as. Even though I was like, I tell people like I ask people if you meet a guy and you're a girl and you're not married, you want to get married. What's the first thing you do? You check to see if there's a ring. It's like literally the first thing you do.
Yep.
You like nothing else matters at that moment.
You want to know if they're married or not.
You want to know if it's possible.
Yeah.
They might be wearing a ring because whatever reason and they're married, but that's like boop. Okay, is it a possibility? Like, what the heck? Like,
I know people
like,
who wear rings just to keep people like that away.
To keep people. But it's should I marry? Like, is this a possibility? Is this a possibility? That's like a weird way to meet people. Or like, are you possibly? And yeah, you like it's a helpful indicator if you meet somebody and then you twig, okay, they're married.
So we know where the boundary line is.
Yeah, exactly. But if that's you're just almost like ultra neutral and they're like, oh, married. No, literally the first thing you look is look for the ring.
Yeah,
that's all I forget about. And then you go, okay, are they good looking or is this ring first, then see if they're like physically attractive or whatever. It's just like a weird.
And then see if you can actually get along with them, if they like you or not.
Yeah, and then it's just, I don't know. It just feels like when I look back, even though I didn't do much dating, I didn't really do any before my ex, but definitely you're just like a vulture looking for prey, like in a sense, you're just like Vero, and they're like, is this a person? Is this a person? Is this person? Is this person? That's all. It's consuming.
You got that. I got you.
It's just you're like this, like big hunter, game hunter, looking for you get a bag. This does. I don't know how guys think. That's honestly how I went about my life, but it was really sad.
It is. It is.
It doesn't mean like I would just like date anybody, but that's literally the first thing you think when you meet like a guy that's possibly marriageable age.
But when you've got that mindset, that's what happens. No matter where you go, you're staking people out. That is not the way to find your spouse. That is a really bad attitude to have because
It's good, like you said, for boundaries. Like, okay, this person's taken. There's, yeah. Also, you don't want to get into a weird situation.
no,
Like, all type of thing. But if it's not just like your whole goal, like your mindset, my mindset for like my 20s was just like, must get married. All costs, almost must get married. And look what it got me. But that was like my whole focus. It's just crazy.
it is. It's insane.
But
Don't do it.
this shit.
Anyways,
No, do we? Yes.
I think we
Might
come.
have to make this
You have
the
to.
two-parter maybe.
We're done.
You're tired of listening.
Or you may want to just snip out some of that other stuff and say, we're going to save this part for the other podcast.
Yeah.
Because
we'll see.
we digressed for about 10 minutes.
A lot.
Yes.
Yes. We digress a lot. That's how we do. Poor David. That's what always confuses him.
He's like, I have no idea where you
He's just
guys
like, I don't even know where we are on this outline anymore. I don't know.
Were we following an
Okay.
outline?
I started to, and then
It just
but
kind of,
this is how I did want to talk about.
yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, next time I'll talk about the dangers of being too marriage focused, and the time after that, a marriage being too single focused.
Yep.
Then hopefully we can find an equal balance between the two. Would be a little bit healthier.
There you go.
Referring to this one kind of, so we're backwards, but I want to just have a conversation about these things.
Mhm.
So, anyway, subscribe, comment, rate a review. That all these things help. Even though we say we're not like caring about people listening, we do want people to hear it because we believe that we are saying something that's true and that can help people.
Yep.
So if you have friends that are
Struggling.
single, divorced, widowed, whatever, trying to figure out where God's calling them, or is maybe too marriage focused and forgetting about life, just direct them towards here, and that maybe can help.
Yep.
So let us know.
Yep.
Until then, have a good week.
Bye for now.
Thanks for joining us today as we explored what it means to live out our singleness with intention and trust. We hope this episode helped you see new opportunities in this season and inspired you to step forward with confidence. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review if this encouraged you or someone you know. Until next time, keep pursuing God's purpose in every season of your life, and remember to live your single life to its fullest.